Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be hosting this live taping of Forked at the Planet Forward Summit. Let's get right to it. So I'm going to introduce our guests. I'm going to let them tell us all a little bit about themselves as well. But why don't we start with you, Sean Sherman, known as the Sioux Chef. Why don't you tell these folks a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is Sean Sherman. I grew up on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, so I'm an enrolled member with the Oglala Lakota tribe. I currently live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I founded a couple of different organizations, a nonprofit that I run called NATIFS, which is an acronym, North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, because if you have a nonprofit, you obviously have to have an acronym.
Yes.
And ideally that says something so you can remember it.
It's a good acronym.
Thanks.
It pans out.
I started a restaurant in Minneapolis called Owamni, which has gotten a lot of acclaim. It's something completely different. We feature indigenous foods. Our philosophy was cutting away colonial ingredients, so we remove things like dairy, wheat flour, cane sugar, beef, pork, chicken, anything that European immigrants brought over. We just kind of use what are the true foods of where we happen to be on this continent. We have a couple of cookbooks out. We have lots of awards and pieces from along the journey, but mostly I do a lot of speaking engagements, and we just try to figure out how to get healthy native food out there to indigenous communities.
Great, and we'll talk more about what you're up to and Minneapolis as well in a second, but I'd like to introduce everyone to Leah Douglas. Why don't you tell us about yourself, Leah?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Leah Douglas. I'm a reporter with Reuters, where I've been for almost 5 years. I cover agriculture and food policy from here in Washington, everything from the USDA to the Hill, to state legislatures, legal issues, anything that has to do with the people who make our food, how it's processed, and how it comes to you. And I also do other coverage areas for Reuters, including health. We'll talk about some health crossover topics today, and occasionally I'm a ringer for all types of other things. I'm a FERN alum. I worked at FERN for 3.5 years. Lots of love for FERN. Woo! Yeah, love nonprofit news. And I've been covering food and agriculture for almost 15 years. So here I am.
That's great. So I just want to say before we really jump in, the slogan for the conference, take the mic, shape the story, I really like that. That's a great slogan. I will say it's giving a little bit of like a, poetry slam vibe. So if you guys feel at any point, because I would love for you to applaud when people say things that you like, but you can also, that would be in keeping with the conference, no problem here. All right, so let's get to it. So Owamni, Sean, you live in the Twin Cities. I think we're all aware of what's been happening there in the, in this year and under the Trump administration and the ICE crackdown. I think people are fairly aware of what happened there. We can talk about it a little bit, but what I'm curious to hear from you about is the situation now. There was a report from Hospitality Minnesota that came out a couple of days ago, the State of Hospitality Minnesota 2026 report, a likely name, which is saying that the restaurant industry in the Twin Cities is in near collapse. And I'm curious to hear your perspective on that from somebody who's running a restaurant there and who is interacting with people who are hungry in Minneapolis and you're a restaurant owner. I know many of your employees are Native American, but I'm assuming you have some immigrant staff or you're aware of immigrant staff. What's it like now feeding people in Minneapolis, St. Paul?
Yeah, Minneapolis was definitely extremely shook by what happened. There was a lot of trauma happening on a daily basis for way too long. And so we saw it coming. We had gathered early in December to try and get in front of it, to come together we had Somali community, we had people from Ilhan's office, we had people from Tina Smith's office, we had people from food shelves, people from some of the Mexican markets, and we all gathered to try to figure out how could we communicate with each other to make sure that people are getting food, because people were already starting to get afraid. But when things really kind of hit the fan, it got bad really fast. So when Nicole Good was murdered and everybody witnessed it, and we saw what the spin that happened immediately on it, even though you could see with your eyes what happened, things really doubled down. School systems shut down, restaurants were just barely struggling. I don't think any restaurant in Minneapolis would have survived another couple of months at most, because we were all down 60-80% across the city at that moment in time. And it was really super challenging, and we had zero safety net. There was nobody that could save us. The city couldn't do anything about it. Our police force couldn't do anything about it. The state couldn't do anything about it. Court systems were too slow. The news reports weren't really getting out what we were seeing on a daily basis, and the government was doing it to us. And so we all kind of just came together. I felt like it felt a little bit like what happened during George Floyd time, which we were also in the midst of there in Minneapolis. But we came together with just a massive amount of underground communication. Like I had way too many signal chats going on. We knew when Greg Bovino was rolling across town with how many cars. All these things were happening all at once, you know. And so things are better, but we haven't put on our guard because we know what they're capable of and we know what the intentions are. So there's still a lot of watches, especially around schools right now, because I drive by them every morning. There's still a lot of people just monitoring to make sure people can get in and out of school safely, for example. And so, you know, some of my staff were personally affected. I had 3 employees held up at gunpoint right outside of our building. One of my young staff from Ecuador was abducted, and he was in Texas by the end of the day. And he was extremely traumatized. You know, he was in, I think, 5 different holding facilities within just a couple of weeks. And it took us some time to figure out how to get him out of that situation. And so it's really affected. And they were taking Native people. I mean, what the where are you going to send Native people? You know, it was crazy. And so, like, it's crazy, and we know what this administration was attempting to do. They were just kind of living out Stephen Miller's wet dream, Greg Bovino's wet dream, and like they were doing what they wanted to do. And like, you know, I tried to use my voice, my platform. I came to DC during that time period. I went straight to Tina Smith's office, who's our senator, and just said, do not give this more money. Like, stop this DHS spending bill in its tracks. Like, because if you give them more money, this is what they're going to do. And this cannot be the reality for other cities in America. I felt like in Minnesota, we were standing strong. I felt like we were going to survive this ice storm, but like we didn't want to see this happen to any other city.
Yeah, it's a battle-tested city. No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the reason why I'm focused on now, I mean, I was in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago. My brother lives there, and you know, there's still people protesting at the Whipple building. Mm-hmm. There are still people who are getting food delivered to them. There's still people driving other folks to work because they're too scared they're too concerned for their own safety to go out on their own. It is not back to normal. It's not. I mean,
no. Yeah. No, and I don't even know what normal is anymore because our reality changed so hard, you know, because like we were talking about, I have a new cookbook out and like I completely forgot about it in January. That just didn't even exist in our reality because we were just trying to get through. We were just trying to figure out how do we get food to people? How do we get people across town? How do we get people to work? Like there was so many basic needs that were out there at that moment. And if you are black or brown in the city, like you just couldn't move anywhere safely at all. That's just the reality that was there.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit away from the protests in Minneapolis. I want to talk to you, Leah, a little bit about some of the stuff that Sean does as it relates to the MAHA movement, which you've covered a lot. So when you talk about the MAHA movement, a lot of the people who are involved in it are in favor of regenerative ag in some form or another, right? And that form of agriculture is essentially indigenous agriculture, right? So you have a focus on regenerative ag in this movement from the right that is doing some of the same things that people on the left have been calling for a long time. And I'm curious, in your reporting on the MAHA movement, are they aware of that? Do they understand that this right-wing political movement is in somewhat ideologically aligned with things that are happening on the left?
I mean, I think, yeah, one of the things to understand about MAHA, and I know y'all have talked about this on Forked before, is this is a very broad umbrella that includes a lot of different types of organizations and people who are not always coordinated on their message and might not even necessarily be aware of the work that's happening under the moniker of MAHA all across the country. So I would say it's difficult to, you know, paint with a broad brush and say, like, is there awareness broadly? It is an interesting phenomenon in time to see, not just in MAHA, but how the Trump administration has also adopted some of the same, you know, regenerative ag or sustainable ag programs and
sort of, right?
Well, there's been a lot of cuts to things, but there have also been, you know, I get press releases, you know, all the time where there's, you know, new funding for this, new funding for that. And it's the same type of programs that were funded, say, under the Biden administration, but packaged in a different way, sort of mirroring what we're seeing in MAHA, right? Where there was, you know, it's similar practices, similar values around soil health and conservation, but the wording is different to align better with.
Well, how so? What do you mean? What is the different? If you can think of it, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Well, even the framing of regenerative agriculture, right? I mean, that is obviously a term and technical term that's existed for a long time, but that's become sort of the catchphrase for what under the Biden administration might have been called climate-friendly farming. These are, and if you look at like how money at USDA, which is wonky, but how, what's being funded, sometimes there's been huge decimation, so not to equate the amounts of money or anything like that, but you'll see similar practices being funded under that new moniker because that resonates with a different base.
So I want to bring you into this conversation, Sean. So when you, and I don't know how closely you follow this, but if you look at the Mahab movement and they're talking about regenerative practices and they're advocating against pesticides and they're talking about very traditional types of farming that we don't do in this country at scale anymore, they're talking about things that you are deeply, deeply interested in and have made your name and your life's work about. How do you feel about that?
Well, my focus is on indigenous food practices, indigenous food systems, and regenerative farming is a big part of that, and permacultural farming and all these pieces. But I feel like I don't trust the Maha movement when it comes to this. I feel like it's greenwashing, basically. I feel like they're using these terminologies because if you follow the money, they're shielding big ag, and they're cutting funding for BIPOC farmers and people of color and smaller farmers. And I think that the money is telling you exactly what they're doing with the situation.
I think that's an important point. I mean, if you guys want, is there snapping? Was somebody snapping? That's awesome. Yeah, everybody should snap. I think that's great. One of the things that's a conundrum of the Trump administration on this particular issue, I mean, some things about the Trump administration are very clear, but is that they can talk about making changes to the food system, but they're not willing to regulate it. It's a deeply anti-regulatory administration. So if you want to change things about the farming system, you may have to implement new rules and laws, and that's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, they're following big ag completely, again, because that's where the dollars are going, and the big ag will use those terminologies. They'll use regenerative farming, but are they actually doing it? No, they're not going to be doing it. They're just going to be changing the way they're putting glyphosate in your food, because we're all microdosing glyphosate anyways, and so what's that going to do to us, But if we're going to do big change, we need something completely structurally different. And I think the ideology is there. I think what they're saying is they're not wrong, that we do need better soil health. We do need to have some better farming practices, but we're not going to see that play out with this situation, again, because follow those dollars, they're going exactly to the same people.
I think I want to talk about that some more. So it is true that the Trump administration is allergic to regulation, and it is not that easy to change the way big ag operates or big food operates in this country without passing new rules and passing new laws. But there does appear to be a wider consensus in the U.S. politically in favor of these practices. And do you, as a reporter, do you see anything happening within an anti-regulatory Republican government that may make some of this happen despite itself? I'm asking you for an opinion. I'm asking you, have you seen any actual action yet?
I don't think, again, what you're talking about to achieve any type of broad scale reform, it's exactly what you just said. It takes huge amounts of political will and huge amounts of regulation. The farming industry is strongly regulated and is strongly, subsidized and structured the way it is for a reason, right? And to turn that ship would require, massive reforms. And I don't think under this administration, there are massive reforms that the USDA under Brooke Rollins is interested in. They're implementing massive reforms to SNAP, for instance. They're implementing massive reforms to Conservation Service, to the Forest Service. Often these reforms are cuts. Right. That's what I was going to say.
Is a cut a reform?
It's changing things.
That's true.
Dramatically and permanently changing things.
Fair enough.
In many cases. So I don't think that they're allergic to change. But I think that when it comes to incentivizing and subsidizing and regulating and all the things you need to shift the massive architecture of the U.S. agricultural system, no, that has not been evidenced in the work they've done so far.
Not so far, yeah. Well, I think one of the things that we can talk about that relates to both sides of this is, and you brought it up already, glyphosate. For those of you who don't follow these things too closely, glyphosate is the main ingredient in Roundup, which is the primary chemical herbicide that is used to raise food at scale in this country. And there is widespread condemnation among the MAHA movement for glyphosate. They are very, very anti-glyphosate, as I imagine, as you are, and people coming at the food systems from the left are also opposed to glyphosate. Anybody who's interested in traditional agriculture is not going to want to have widespread microdosing of glyphosate, is the way you put it. One of the things that we're seeing, though, is a huge contradiction between the needs and desires of the MAHA movement, which in no small degree helped put Donald Trump in office in his second term, and the government about glyphosate. And I think one of the things that's interesting to me, there's a Supreme Court case right now about glyphosate. It's actually called Monsanto. What is it? Monsanto versus Durnell. And Bayer now owns Monsanto, and they are being sued around the country by people who've gotten cancer, they believe, from exposure to glyphosate, who say that Bayer should have warned them. The problem is, and this is where the court case comes into play, at the federal level, glyphosate's legal. So if you have a chemical that is legal federally, you should not have to put a warning label on it warning somebody against potentially getting cancer. That's what's at issue in this Supreme Court case. And if the Supreme Court rules in favor of Bayer, it basically means that many of these lawsuits, some of which have been successful, they can't go forward anymore. So the MAHA folks are really unhappy about this. They're not happy with the EPA. They're not happy with the Trump administration because they feel like they've been betrayed on the issue of glyphosate. And then you have the people on the left who are saying, well, we've been against glyphosate all along. So there's a big event that's coming up here in DC. I think it's April 27th at the Supreme Court. The MAHA movement's holding a rally. I think it's called the People versus Poison. Do you expect to see, and I don't know if you're following it closely enough, but I think there will, along with right-wing MAHA people, there will be people from the center and the left there. Is that a sign of any of that political will that has so far not materialized?
Yeah, the glyphosate issue is a really interesting one because not only does it draw out tensions between MAHA and the Trump administration, but it also starts to show some of the tensions between Kennedy and the Trump administration. Because if we take a step back, the reason that MAHA...
Sorry, RFK Jr., Secretary of Health and Human Services, that's it. Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Washington shorthand.
You can just call him Bobby.
Yeah, right, exactly. So the reason MAHA cares strongly about this issue is in part because Bobby cares strongly about this issue and has brought it into that'll be the only time you ever hear me do that, by the way. Because he brought that, strongly, he's been anti-glyphosate for a long time, has spoken out very strongly about it as a presidential candidate, and sort of toned back the rhetoric a bit once he became health secretary, but the MAHA movement really picked up that issue. And, is opposed to the use of glyphosate in alignment with sort of a streak in MAHA that's sort of anti-toxins. And what they see is, what any person in MAHA sees as a toxin, you'll have to ask them. It ranges, but glyphosate is one that comes up a lot. So April 27th is the day of oral arguments at the Supreme Court for this important case, and that's why there's this rally. Just today they released the list of speakers, and I thought it was interesting because, we discussed there's one Democratic Congresswoman, Shelley Pingree from Maine, who'll be speaking.
But it's mostly not. It's mostly right.
But overwhelmingly, it's MAHA-aligned folks and right-wing, Kennedy and Trump-aligned folks. So that's really seems to be the thrust of who they're expecting to be there if it's represented in the speaker list.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, Sean. So with this issue, right? You have an opportunity, if you are someone who cares about the food system, to influence events, right? Does it matter to you if that influence is coming from the right for this movement that you say you don't trust and that you think is actually kowtowing to big ag? Let's say, put that aside, that distrust aside for a moment. If you felt that this particular rally was sincere, would you go, right? There's all these other things that they do you might not like about, but you might be getting something out of them from this particular thing. And how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, we work with allies out there all the time, and
But these wouldn't be allies.
exactly, not necessarily in that context.
Yeah.
But I mean, if they were aligned with trying to make some positive change towards some of the status quo that we've been dealing with at this moment, especially things like glyphosate out there in the fields, because our goal is completely different. We try to just push money towards Indigenous producers who are doing the actual work.
Yeah.
And because they can't rely on government money, especially in a time like right now. And so we try to use our food service systems. We have restaurants and we push $750,000 a year just to Indigenous food production out of a single kitchen. And we're showing a model that actually works, right? And so we just want to show what we can do. So I would be happy if people were actually going to align, but again, I don't trust them because I feel like they're just going to cave into big ag no matter what happens, and they're just going to monetize a term like regenerative agriculture just like they monetize organics, And so I feel like either you're doing the work or you're not, you have to walk the walk at the same time. And so that's where it really comes down to it. And so who's actually in the fields, who's actually got their fingers in the soil, who's actually watching these plants grow and taking care of those cycles every single year, and who's purchasing those foods, And so I challenge restaurants, why are you blindly buying everything from a Cisco or Aramark knowing exactly where those foods are coming from? If you're really going to be mission-based, then buy them from the people who are making change.
I agree with all that. Yeah. So you mentioned your restaurant in Minneapolis. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about a new project that you have. So your restaurant, it's called Owamni. You are about to close that, and in June you'll be opening a new restaurant called Indigenous. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think all good things need to come to an end, and so Owamni is an amazing restaurant, and I know you've been there.
I have,
and it's a beautiful space, and we did something completely different. With our philosophy, it's probably one of the healthiest restaurants in the country. Everything's gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, soy-free, pork-free. And we've been able to really challenge how we think about American foods with that restaurant. But we're moving into something different. We're having an opportunity to move into a bigger space. The restaurant's owned by the nonprofit that I created solely because we wanted to use restaurants differently. It's a place where we hire a lot of intentional staff. We have a large Indigenous workforce. We move intentionally a bunch of food dollars to the producers we want to support. Like I said, over almost $750,000 a year. That number is going to grow exponentially as we continue to expand. And it just creates a lot of attention for us, So and plus, as a direct response to what happened in Minneapolis in January with our own government demonizing people because they spoke a separate colonial language, Spanish, because English is also a foreign language on this land space, that I wanted to just there's no reason, some of these Indigenous young people coming from Mexico and South America, their families have been on these continents for millennia before the people kicking them off of this space because of these imaginary lines they've drawn in the sand. And so I leaned into a Spanish word, which is Indigenous, the Spanish word for indigenous, because I wanted to erase colonial borders. I wanted to think about what do the Americas look like without the borders, Because I feel like if you're black or brown in the Americas, you should get a passport that allows you to work anywhere the you want to.
Well, good luck with it. I'm looking forward to going out there and eating. I'm going to make a bit of a hard segue. You were talking about a transition. I would like to transition to a different topic, and one that you are covering in depth right now, which is GLP-1s, right? So
these transitions need a little work.
This is not as easy as it looks, I appreciate it. Well, anyway, one of the things that I think is interesting that is happening, there was an article in the New York Times today. It's called the Great Ozempic Experiment. And it talks about some of the stuff I was familiar with, which is that just this mass usage of Ozempic and other GLP-1s in the United States in a very, very rapid period of time, just basically dating to 2000 when it was mostly a diabetes drug. But it also talked about all these other off-label uses that people were using it for. I mean, you talked about microdosing glyphosate. People are not microdosing glyphosate, Ozempic for glyphosate purposes, but they are microdosing it for longevity purposes. Apparently it can help you live longer, maybe. There was a woman in the article who they talked about use it to resolve her concussion syndromes. There's people taking it to break addictions to cigarettes and sex and obviously to food and all kinds of other things. So I'm curious about you as a reporter. Have you encountered some of these more eccentric, I think, off-label uses for GLP-1s as it just sort of takes over the country?
Yeah, well, GLP-1s are just a fascinating topic that I've covered a bit more extensively in the last few months as covering health at Reuters. And I was saying backstage, I feel like it's one of these topics you could just become obsessed with and not think about anything else because it just encompasses so many phenomena happening right now in the US. One of the things I found so interesting about that Time story by Julia Belluz is that the science is people are using GLP-1s for all types of uses that, have not been clinically studied or are in the process of being clinically studied and, are having all types of, in some cases, really wonderful, clearing up things like arthritis and eczema. But also, there is also some concern and wariness, I think, among consumers and some physicians about, is that appropriate given that we've only had these drugs for a very short time. I did some reporting speaking to obesity specialists in the last few months and specifically about the rollout of GLP-1 pills, which is something we've just started to see in the last couple of months. And in some ways, they've said this is, one of the most exciting times to be working in this field because they're seeing patients who are having, life-changing experiences in a positive way. Of course, there are some people who really can't take GLP-1s for a variety of reasons, but also, the sense of sort of building the plane while you're flying it, I think can be uncomfortable too for any science-based profession and for consumers. So yeah, I think it's going to be something we're continuing to see as front page science and health and food news for a long time.
I thought one of the interesting things of that article was, it had always been explained to me that the way that Ozempic and these other drugs worked is it does something to your gut biome, whatever that means. I hear, this is one of those terms, gut biome is a term, and I'm working in food journalism. I hear it all the time. I don't entirely know what it means, but it must mean something because people use it all the time, right? Apparently that's not true, right? There's signals in the brain that it is changing, that is helping people with their appetite and their desire to eat, which for me, maybe as a cynic, I read as this is a mass national placebo delusion, right? If it's coming from the brain, not from I don't know why I'm valuing signals from the brain over signals from the gut biome, but that's just how I feel about it. Sean, I'll bring you into it a little bit and let you opine about Ozempic. You are a chef, you cook for people, you try to delight them with food, educate them with food, inspire them, all kinds of things. What do you think of, have you encountered any change in people's diets now in the Ozempic era? And if you have not, would you change anything on any of your menus to account for the way people are now going to eat?
No, I wouldn't change. I mean, our purpose is completely different, because we're showing a different way to look at food systems through a non-Eurocentric lens, and we're trying to showcase there's so much more plant diversity, which would create a much better gut biome for you if you had a lot more plant diversity in your diet. And, we want people to eat healthier in general, and that's just why, the indigenous diet of North America just happens to be a really healthy diet, because like I said, the entire restaurant is gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, soy-free, pork-free, all that stuff. And we're able to we don't even have to use the word health food with that situation. And I just feel like with, restaurants and chefs, we have a lot of followers, we have a lot of influence, and we should be promoting a lot of health. We shouldn't be coming up with the next 8,000 calorie hamburger, to get in the paper. And we should be really focused on how do we create just really solid, good food coming from really solid, good producers who we know are doing it right, And so I just feel like Ozempic, it's not going to go away, obviously, because it's easy and people like easy. But I feel like we need to do the work. We need to educate ourselves better on our food systems. We need to have a lot more education on plants and where food comes from. We need to have a lot more plant diversity in our diet. We have to understand that, this giant continent is a massively diverse area, and especially with for our purposes, for Indigenous cultures, it's massively diverse how people survive for thousands of generations without Ozempic. And we've been able to do it really well and very healthy when we didn't even have tooth decay on this continent, for example. And so there's a whole bunch of things that can be, there are other paths for health out there, obviously. And food is just a massively important piece to that puzzle of what we eat and how we eat, and just considering all of it.
Are you maybe like me? I'm not in the pharmaceutical industry. I've not taken Ozempic. I don't know if it works or doesn't work. It seems to be working for people. But I find it mind-bogglingly difficult to accept the idea that it is working for so many people that they are actually eating fewer Doritos, right? Does that strike you as plausible?
I mean, it's
people
very
like
possible.
Doritos. They taste good. That's why people eat them. But apparently not. Apparently they're changing the way Americans actually eat with this pharmaceutical.
And it's very possible that it can make some major shifts in the snack industry, I suppose. Which needs to happen anyways, right? And so, but I don't know if I don't think it's the healthiest way. I think we need to be a lot more intentional with it. It feels a little bit of a cop-out to take something that kills your appetite, I suppose. I don't really understand it 1,000%, but I think we need better education around food. I think we need better education, again, on where we get food and where food comes from, and utilizing so much more plant diversity. There's so much cool stuff around us, and we could be having cooler farms and stuff like that, but we're not going to see that right now. We're not going to, with the rollback of monies going to BIPOC and smaller farmers, that's only going to open more doors for big ag to take over more soil spaces, and so it's going to go in the wrong direction no matter what. So the fight's bigger than this, and again, we need to eat healthier. That's the key to it. We just need to eat healthier.
It's going to go in the wrong direction no matter what. I'm going to use that as another hard segue to our final segment of this podcast. It's something that we call the good vibes. So at the end of our show, we try to come up with at least one thing that we can take some hope for in the United States, in the food system, in food politics and policy in some way. Oftentimes, I find that it is the hardest thing for us to do on the show. I've asked Sean and Leah to provide us something, but I won't put them on the spot just yet. I'll go first, right? And I will warn everyone that my story of the good vibe is extraordinarily passive-aggressive, so you'll just have to bear with me here. So at FERN, we put out a podcast recently about oyster farming on the Gulf Coast. It was with an NPR affiliate, the Sea Change podcast. And it was all about these oyster farmers and how in Louisiana they were starting to switch away from off-the-bottom oysters to farmed oysters. And as a result of that, I got invited to come down to a podcast taping in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, where they were going to talk about the future of oysters there. And as part of the podcast, and I wish, maybe we should have done the same thing, they had free raw oysters at the podcast. They farmed, right? And during the panel discussion, they were talking about concerns about the safety of Gulf oysters post-oil spill, which was a long time ago. And one of the men who was the owner of an oyster company, well, I won't say the name of the company or his name because I'm about to sort of make fun of him a little bit, says that we shouldn't be concerned about Gulf oysters. They're delicious. They're safe. We need a bunch of Yankees to come down here and eat them all up, but we don't want them to stay, right? And then at the end of the podcast, I started talking to him, and I guess he heard my New York accent, although I am in fact half from New York, half from Mississippi. I have a weird background. He apologized to me, and he said, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to call you out as a Yankee. And I was like, it's okay, it's fine. But I will tell you, eat Mississippi farmed oysters, but we're staying in Mississippi. So that's my good vibe. Who wants to go next? Who wants to be put on the spot? How could you follow a story like that? I mean,
I didn't realize this was an opportunity to air our grievances.
That's the best part.
Anonymous strangers should prepare more grievances.
Well, please do then.
No, I don't. I actually have a good vibe.
All right, wow. Well, there's one grievance right there.
I feel so innocent. I've been ranting. Well, my good vibe is not specifically food related, but is news related. So it still feels topical. And we never have any good news, so yay. But here in the DC area, we have a publication. It's based in Baltimore called the Baltimore Banner. I don't know if anyone is a subscriber. Yes, we love the Banner. They're expanding into my home county of Prince George's County, which we love local news. And the nonprofit that is backing the banner, also love nonprofit news, double plug, just bought the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and saved them from closure, which is very exciting. And that was just a great piece of uplifting media news this week. There will be news in Pittsburgh, which is where I was born. So there you go. Now I have a personal connection. Maybe I'll start reading the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And we love the banner, local news for Maryland. Yay.
That is a good vibe. And I think it's, for me, somebody who works in nonprofit journalism, it's real evidence that that model of journalism can work. I think there's a lot of times in journalism, things are held up as a savior. Oh, nonprofit journalism is going to save us. Video is going to save us. Nothing's going to save us. We're all going to have to make do ourselves. But nonprofit journalism is one very, very important part of the future of our media. So I think, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a really good vibe. Better than my airing of grievances. Sean, you're up.
All right. Yeah, I told them earlier that I was just going to come up with something off the top of my head, so I'll do my best. I mean, I think we can all feel good that our fearless leader can now heal people with the power of his hands. So we don't really need Ozempic or anything now.
Now that's the spirit of the good vibe right there. All right, that's a man who knows what he's talking about.
Aside from that, I do feel really empowered of my city, of where we come from, of Minneapolis, of how we faced this ice storm. I feel really proud that we came together we were under siege, literally, and being violenced every day. And our vibe was not that of defeat. Our vibe was not that of wanting to cave and turn it into violence, which we thought they were just trying to bait us for. But we really came together. We became so organized. We became just a voice out of nowhere in the face of all of this intensity. And so I feel very proud of how that all happened and how we showed this whole situation of how we can react.
Hear, hear. Absolutely. So I just want to say a few words towards the end here. And first, I just want to thank all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a present audience and responding to us with claps and snaps. That's great. But I want to talk about why I'm so happy and grateful that we had Sean and Leah here together. So when you think about what they do, they're in tension, but also in support of each other. So Sean, you are focused on indigenous food systems and indigenous food ways. It's hard to think of something that is taking more of a longer term view than that. It truly is about the food system of this continent and about the world. So I think that's an amazing thing. We're lucky to be here and talk to you about it. And if you're ever out in Minneapolis, you should go eat it, because it's an expression of those ideas and those concepts. And then we have you, Leah, who is a beat reporter, who's documenting the news as it happens and offering a way for people to understand it on a daily basis. And that is equally important, although it is short-term by its nature. So I think we're lucky to have a conversation where we are combining the very long-term and the very thoughtful with the very thoughtful and the very short-term. So I thank you both for that. And with that, I'm just going to say thank you all of you, and tune in to the next Forked. I appreciate it.